introduction. I don't know how dynamic and awesome I am, but I just thank you for the opportunity to come in and speak to our fantastic media specialists throughout our district. And more so today versus like a preaching session or even like a formal professional development session. I more so wanted to have a conversation about some pressing issues that we're dealing with throughout just nationally when it comes to our educational policy right now. I know we've all, had talks, and I know I've done them before. We've all been in professional development around diversity, inclusion, multiculturalism, equity, and all of those words that are usually used within school districts, right? Um, and I just wanted to kind of just have a conversation, just kind of peel back some of the layers of what multiculturalism is, what is diversity, what is inclusion, right? Because we've kind of arrived at a place when in our school districts when we talk about use those words, we use those words in a way that without an operational definition of those words and what some of that stuff means, right? Like for example, when we say culturally responsive, and I just noticed Lisa, my name is Brian here, which is cool. I'm good. But anyway, it is all good.
I do it to my husband all the time. He's also Brian.
I'm middle of talking. I looked over and I said, "Oh yeah, cool." Um, but more so using those words and really fully understanding what they mean. And what I was saying around culturally responsive before I got sidetracked, I get distracted easy. Um, but making sure that when we say diversity and inclusion, we kind of have this one approach of a one size fits all approach in the first place. Without understanding the complexities of culture and also the complexities of just personal experiences and also interests of our students and just understanding their culture, right? Because we have so many different groups of students throughout our school districts, our Black students, our Latinx and Latino, Hispanic, our Asian American students. And within each of those groups, there's a lot of complexities that are included within that. Understanding there's a lot of cultures within those larger cultures itself, right? So, first of all, why do we even use any or even approaching a work around cultural responsiveness and within our classroom? We've all heard about the mirrors in the windows and the sliding glass doors, making sure that we use instruction and making sure that schools are educational, liberating, and safe spaces for our kids to foster pride by seeing themselves represented within our instructional materials, books, and curriculum. And also, when we say on windows, making sure that we give opportunity for students to understand about their opposite cultures, right? Of students who don't look like them, understanding their experiences, their lived experiences, their cultural norms, their traditions, their perspectives, and their values as well. But one of the things when we talk about representation within our schools and within our books, and one of the things that I've definitely noticed within elementary school books is sometimes when we have representation, the representation itself does not have a positive representation. And what I mean by that, usually we're stuck within this real narrow confines and parameters when it comes to the history of African Americans, for example, or even history of our children that are from Latin America. And we get stuck within a box and the confines of oppression, racism, repression, and discrimination, and those students and overcoming some kind of obstacle without understanding that the experiences of these students is much more complex, and also the history that these students derive from is much more complex than just that aspect of the history. Yes, trauma is part of the history, racism is part of that history, but that is not the entire history. So that's why when it comes to some of the recent legislation that we're facing around critical race theory, is that when we say anything about multiculturalism, we think it's synonymous to that legislation, that is synonymous to critical race theory, without understanding that there was so much more to the experience. There was so much beauty, there's so much brilliance, there's so much creativity, there's so much joy that can be extracted from those cultures, that those kids can be able to interact and engage with instructional materials that explore their joy, that cultivate some of the excellence that lies within kids. Um, and again, understanding just there's so much unique culture And there's so many layers to those students that we are here to support and serve, and understand that there's just so much complexity with each of those cultures, and there is not a one size fits all approach to addressing the academic and the social emotional needs of students. Making sure that first of all that we build relationships that we know the students, and we're able to customize those interests based off of the relationships that we build with those students. So one of the things that I wanted to kind of have a discussion around is some of the challenges that we're having in face of the legislation that we have that are occurring around critical race theory, which passed last year in June. Also, some of the new House bills that are going into effect this summer, and some of the challenges that you all are dealing with and facing with that, and ways that we can kind of come up with solutions to address that. Is kind of the focal point of the conversation today. So Lisa, I just want to kind of open up and just have the conversation with them, and just kind of provide some viable practical solutions and some viable supports that my department can offer down the road.
So anyone who has a question, feel free to open up your mic and go ahead and ask away. So,
and one of the things also I want to disseminate also, I'm sorry, Lisa, and there's a curriculum framework that we work with anyway. And then within that curriculum framework, it talks about the areas within the history that should be addressed according to cognitive level, to make sure that the information and content is also developmentally appropriate based on age and grade level.
So how do you foresee all this legislation impacting our library collections? I know that first and foremost on everyone's mind. I can honestly say that our media specialists do try to have those windows, mirrors, and sliding glass doors, and have the correct viewpoints, and not have everything be negative. But now we have the legislation to contend with, and maybe you have some guidance that you can offer us in terms of how the legislation will impact what we can and can't put on the shelves.
For the most part, a lot of it that we're learning as it unfolds. And to be honest with you, after really examining the current legislation that's coming out, it's kind of, honestly, we're all in the same position because it's entirely confusing. To be honest with you, it kind of contradicts itself in some ways. You know, you have one aspect that we can't say this, but then we can teach this. And without some of those other aspects that I say that is not the centrality of the narrative, is part of the narrative, right? So I really can't have any full academic integrity without teaching the entire narrative itself. I really think when it comes to approaching these topics, it's not about necessarily teaching some of the topics, it's the approach and the delivery of those topics, and making sure that you have guidance and support and facilitating those topics with students. In addition to some aspects of those topics, definitely at the lower levels, pre-K through 2 should be completely avoided in the first place, right? Based on just what we have within our instructional matrix and curriculum framework, which actually was something that was created by the African American History Task Force in Tallahassee, which I work with. The curriculum framework that we've had for years, especially when it came to the pre-K through second grade levels, was not included with some of the things that they're forbidden in critical race theory and legislation right now.
So we have a question from a media specialist. With our diversity books, some of them are now banned. How does she remain a safe place with all voices represented? And I think this is the $1 million question. And we're all looking for that answer. We're trying to extract the answer from the legislation.
Yeah, and when you say which books are banned, I'm sorry, did you cut out on my end when you said that?
Some of the diversity books, particularly are LGBTQ books. Some of the content is now banned. So how do we continue to create those safe places that are near and dear to our hearts, while not breaking the law?
Absolutely. Right now, that's something that my team and I are working with. I'm working with William Pete Stewart, around ways to address this because we've not really kind of even felt the full ramifications of what is actually going to happen this upcoming June, around just what can we talk about, how can we continue to make sure that we have diverse and inclusive, and most important, liberating and safe spaces for our students, especially in elementary, based on just what is happening in legislation, specifically around LGBTQ plus, in particular, because there's so much language that is coming down, and with that has come down, especially through legislation. Um, One of the things that I always mention whenever I have these conversations is also making sure that we focus on, we have predated legislation that also says it is required instruction. When you look at 1003.42 subsection HPQ and G, of state mandate 1003.42, and also our local policy as well with school district policy 1.041. So at the same time, we have a lot of conflicting and contradicting policies that are out there right now, um, around that. So it's complete confusing landscape. And sorry, I may not even have all the answers, to that particular part because of where we are, in this legislation with it being so new. And if you really just, like I said, examine the legislation, it is entirely confusing because it contradicts itself in a lot of ways.
Yeah, it's definitely confusing, and disheartening. I know we spent, I think it was about 5 hours unpacking legislation to see if we could figure out how it affects library media and our collections and our students. Um, but it's going to come down to the legal department.
That's really what it comes down to. Almost everything that we're currently doing right now, any books that are purchased, even on our end, even when it comes to our summer professional development and everything, has to go through legal right now to just examine language right now because it's just the complexities of, the state legislation right now.
Right. And there definitely is some vagueness in that legislation. We
Very
have
much so.
questions regarding what constitutes age appropriateness. Who decides what that is?
Absolutely.
We've,
Absolutely.
we've had our fallback of those 2 positive reviews for the age group. That helps to determine our age appropriateness, but is that age appropriate based on the legislature's new rules?
Yes, absolutely. But my biggest advice, go ahead. I think somebody had their hand up. I think it's Debbie that had a question.
So I teach in a high school, and pretty much any book in my collection could be challenged because of its content, regardless. I mean, every young adult book in this media center deals with a young adult issue, whether it's cutting or rape or something racial. I mean, I work really hard. I think my colleagues do also, especially at the high school level, to make sure that the books that are in this collection, Lisa said 2 positive reviews, but I usually try to have 3 authoritative reviews that say it, even if it deals with a very tough subject, it's written with integrity and addressed in a manner that is appropriate for the age group. But honestly, that puts, the library is the last bastion of freedom of choice. You get to read, you get to pick what you want to read. And I get the K2, I do, but I think it's going to be especially hard at the high school level. And, some people are freaking out like, I'm going to be tired. They're going to come in here. I'm going to be tired. And anything taken out of context, even the most well-written K2 book taken out of context, let alone, I'm reading The Last Night at the Telegraph Club, which has won all kinds of awards. And I'm cringing at it because I feel like any page taken out of context, if I don't know if anyone's read that book, a very controversial book moving forward, I'm sure. So I'm, how do I be in compliance with the district, but still as a librarian and understanding it's my responsibility to be the bridge, the mirror, the conduit between the child who really needs that, especially in a high school. And I'm wondering, I don't mean this in a lousy way, but like, is the district gonna work with us and look at our sources that we go to for reviews, so that when the parent challenges it, I can say, well, it's won these 3 awards, and these are all the positive reviews, and I would be negligent not to have that book in my collection, because there are students that need that book, and so I'm not doing my job if I don't have that book in the collection. And I don't know how many people got the Follett notice that they were going to have a conversation about putting a feature in Destiny, which made me completely come unglued. They've canceled that conversation because right now, I have a student now. Please, Mrs. Speck, if my mom ever asks me what I checked out, promise me you won't tell her. Of course I'm not going to, so I mean, these things are happening in schools. They've been happening long before the legislature. To be honest, the way our district policy is, we could have been fired for anything years and years ago. This really isn't new. It's just in the forefront right now. So what kind of support, Brian, do you feel there is at the district level? Because that challenge is just around the corner.
I'll let you go first, Brian, and then I'll address it from library media.
Address it from library media first, and I'm gonna bounce off of you. I have an answer, Debbie, and mine is going to be completely honest and transparent.
Okay.
So, from our perspective, as the collection or the selection policy stands, you have those 3 positive reviews. We have your back.
Okay.
Right. How it shakes out with the legislation is another ballgame, but as it stands today, with our current selection plan, that's why we have that. That policy allows us to choose those books. And in it specifically, it says, and I know you know this, I'm preaching to the choir with this, remember, not every book is for every child.
Of course.
Right? So there's that part that if a parent is uncomfortable or a child's uncomfortable, of course, they can just return that book. And so we can head a lot of the things off with that.
The district bought Little and Lion for 10th grade.
Mm-hmm.
And I sat on that challenge committee. That parent did not read the book from cover to cover. So this is another issue that concerns me. Most of the things through my years in the district, it's been taken out of context. And some of what I've seen on TV, people like, oh my God, look at this paragraph. But any paragraph taken out of context.
100%. And I will say that the challenge documents do say that we need to examine the work as a whole.
Yeah.
We cannot take these passages out of context, because if we do, we're losing the meaning of what the book is.
Right? Well, that parent did lose the challenge, because that was the first question asked. Have you read the book in its entirety? And the parent had not. But so these are just
that language matters, right? That language that you need to judge the work on the entirety and the literary merit of the entire work, not just on a single passage. Because obviously we're going to have something that offends absolutely everyone.
Oh, I do.
So Brian, I'm going to let you address it from your perspective, because you've got a different viewpoint than I do.
Yeah, I do have a different viewpoint, because I have probably some different experiences with kind of dealing with it, especially specifically around even the public record requests and some of the challenges that we've received. Debbie, I'm going to be honest, is that you have a lot of people that are in leadership, some people in leadership that are going to have our backs and making sure that we continue to work, because within my job title, this is just what I do. Right. So almost anything, any word that comes out of my mouth, or anything that I do, or any curriculum that I put out there, technically can be challenged right now. So you do have people that are going to protect that academic freedom that we do have within the school district. I know I definitely will. and I'm definitely going to use even language, even within the current legislation that we have, that does say that we're supposed to teach this stuff, right? And I think a lot of the language is confusing because it strikes fear from people who just like you're saying, they're just afraid to do anything at this point because of just the confusing language. So out of confusion, I'm just not going to do anything at all to make sure that I'm diverse and inclusive my school site. I would just say, to protect yourself personally. First thing is just make sure that that you're covered yourself. The facilitation is on point. I say the biggest part of it is just making sure that how do we present the information to our students. But at the end of the day, there's parts and language in it that does protect it. At the same time, it's some that attacks it. So using that same legislation also to protect yourself and understand that you have departments, you have entities at the school district that is continue to fight and that's going to continue to move forward with the work of make sure that we create those safe environments for our kids to be themselves and just be affirmed in the work. So the best advice I would tell you just to continue to do the work and understand that there are people who are standing firm in this work. And there is a process, like Lisa say, when it comes to a challenge process. The parent can't come in and just say that he's going to remove something and it just disappears overnight. There's a process for that.
Okay, well, before I read the book, I actually ordered it, so I'm going to hold you to that. But I mean, it won the Prince Award. It's won an award for diversity for Chinese American or LGBTQ. So we'll see where it goes.
And just understanding in this climate, in the climate that we're in, the resistance is going to come. As I was sitting here, and this is like no lie, no joke at all. I literally just see the same. Got an email from somebody already trying to attack my summer conference that I'm doing for African and African American Studies. I literally just got one that I have to address when I get off this call. So it is going to come regardless. Unfortunately. It's just the being able to just be able to stand firm and resist whatever challenges are going to come our way in this climate right now. And understand that there are people that got your back, and you definitely can hold me to it. This is just the work I live by, and it means so much to me as a Black man who has a Black child within the school district. That my vested interest is beyond just interest. It's my survival. So therefore, I will stand by that, and whatever that my department can do to have our teachers and our media specialists back and everybody in our school sites to make sure that we provide those spaces for our kids.
Does that help, Eddie? I hope.
Yeah, I mean, because I felt for a long time I have things that could be challenged. But now it's in everyone's face. And also as part of in the legislative committee, we're going to go to Tallahassee as soon as legislation comes back in session to meet with them about this. So right. I'm glad that I can say we in Palm Beach County have your support from your department, especially.
Right. It goes back to that article I shared in our selection, collection, and development training. Can you have a challenge-proof library? We all know the answers. You cannot. Yeah. But if you're following the policies and procedures that we have in place to build those quality collections, we can have your back when those challenges arise. It's super, I'm not going to tell you that it isn't frustrating and upsetting and all of that, but it's fairly straightforward. Having sat on that district challenge committee, if you're not following that process, that book is going to remain. And I can tell you that this year, all challenges have been resolved at the informal level. So they have not progressed.
Okay.
So that's good news. Parents are upset. They don't want this for their child. That is their choice. And of course, we can mark their destiny records as such.
Right.
Ensuring that book remains on the shelf for everyone else. Every parent has the right. That works both ways.
Absolutely.
Right? It's not just I want to limit. I want a broad scope of topics for my child. And no one has the right to infringe upon that. That's that parental choice. Everyone's parental choice is different, but we can solve for both. It's going to be challenging. But it's good to be coming to conversations like these and talking with fellow media specialists, other district support staff, because then we can continue to have these conversations and puzzle it out, because I'm sure there's a solution that protects our students and keeps us in compliance. We may not know it yet, but there has to be one.
And I think that's why we need to have these conversations and make sure it's a continuing conversation. And I don't think this is something that we should drop right here. I think it should continue because all of the legislation is completely new. So a lot of people are not really knowing how to deal with it. And even our legal team here at the district who is interpreting it is kind of interpreting it right now in present tense. Still trying to figure it out, still trying to grapple with it and unfold it. And as we just have these continuing conversations, and I think just continue to move forward with the work. Lisa, you brought up a very strong, valid point, is that we have one side of resistance, but we also have a side of support around making sure that we have these titles and making sure that we engage in conversations with our students around some of these sensitive topics, right? In our schools and with our media centers or whatever it is on our campus. Just making sure that there are multiple perspectives, there are multiple sides to this entirely battle. And I don't think that we should always fold and placate to just one single narrative or one point of view when it comes to these topics. We have multiple points of view. And honestly, it's all kind of even goes back to the purpose of why we're here, those mirrors and windows. And I think if we had a more diverse education process in the first place, people will have an understanding of each other as we know it. And a lot of this stuff comes out of fear. A lot of it comes to resistance of change from older ways. And you all, we all in this room have a critical part to play in being proactive and making sure that we create another, help influence another generation that are more receptive to other people's experiences and points of view.
Right. I think you're right. I think it's our children. Our children are super accepting.
Yep.
The things that bother adults roll off the back of a child. They don't think twice about it. I can say that with a personal experience, right? 17-year-old and a 20-year-old. And they don't think twice about it. They're just accepting. They don't try to understand. They just accept. I mean, they try to understand, but they don't have to understand. They just accept. That's the way it is, and that's who that person is.
And it goes back to, just having the capacity to facilitate those conversations. Making sure that as the adults in the room, that we're educating ourselves, taking every advantage of professional development around these topics to make sure that we can take it back and facilitate it appropriately with our kids.
That's right.
Is the key thing. I think sometimes it gets lost in the communication, a huge community. Sometimes we're not ready and equipped to have those conversations, and it comes off completely wrong. So just taking the opportunity to self-educate, and also take opportunities for just the professional development that we have offered in the district and even outside of the district sometime around these topics. I know my department, despite legislation, I'm going to continue to have my professional development and continue to move forward with the work that we do.
So you've got support from both Brian's department and our department, and that's a power, and from higher up. It's important to feel supported in the work that we're doing, because right now it's harder than ever to do that work.
Very challenging right now.
For sure. Any other questions we can address?
And honestly, I don't have all the answers right now either, Lisa. Because
No.
we're figuring it out as we go. Yeah, I'm in constant meetings trying to kind of strike a balance with my own work right now based on some of the current legislation of what can be done.
And as are we.
Yeah.
I'm sure that our two departments are going to collide in that work and continue to puzzle it out how it's best for our students while maintaining the compliance with the law.
Absolutely.
But the end game is our kids, and our kids deserve the work.
Yep.
So.
And the aim here, and I can just probably wrap it up here, is that we're trying to include but not exclude anybody's story. We're trying to be more proactive, that we kind of foster a climate that people can develop a sense of understanding of each other's perspectives, so we can avoid future occurrences like this that we're in right now. And just making sure that we have safe, liberating spaces for our students, to make sure that every student, regardless of how we see it, are affirmed and validated within our schools, right? It's critically important just for the overall mental health of our students, to make sure that they have those spaces, that they feel that they're included, that they're validated in the front.
100%.
And
Particularly from coming back from the craziness that was the last 2 years,
yes,
they need it now more than ever.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And this is not a political agenda. It's none of those different things that have been thrown out there. It's about just purely objectively sharing each other's culture and experiences, and being able to just embrace and genuinely just love each other as just human beings that we are.
So I want to thank Brian for joining us today. We're going to continue this conversation. Brian and I will be continuing this conversation. Brian and I will be continuing this conversation with you guys, because it matters. It matters deeply to our students, to our faculty, to our staff. It matters.
Absolutely.
So with that, I really suggest joining your local professional organization and your state professional organization, right? They're the ones that are advocating on your behalf at Tallahassee. They may not listen to us all the time, but we do the best we can. We try to get that message across. It's imperative to join and have your voice be heard through these organizations. It is not all doom and gloom. Of course, we are having some wonderful get-togethers with Emma. We would like to have you come with a spring get-together on April 13th at Bradley's from 5 to 7. Everyone, not just Emma members, are welcome, but Emma members will receive one drink ticket. So please join us at Bradley's on April 13th. And then please join us on May 3rd at the Palm Beach Airport Hilton from 5 to 7 for our celebration of media specialists. It's a departure from our normal format, and it's an effort to get everybody back together. Emma is footing the bill for this. So it is free for your principal. It is free for you. Please come and celebrate all the amazing things that you do. This is going to be going out via email tomorrow. And please share it with your principal. We want everyone to come and join us. On a positive note, we had a wonderful conversation with Mr. Tierney and Mr. Burke last Wednesday, I believe it was, on the same morning that Mr. Burke filled in Tempe Craven's Media Center. So we had the added understanding of what goes on in a media center. That was a really powerful visit and it really, really moved Mr. Burke. He was so overjoyed and bubbling about everything that he saw and experienced. So we were well represented with Tempe, and our superintendent has a newfound appreciation for what media specialists do, particularly what the elementary schedule is like, the day-to-day. That makes it not that easy to do our job. And it was a wonderful advocacy moment for us. Please continue to tag us on Twitter, #LoveMyLibrary PBCSD. You guys are doing amazing things in challenging times, and it's wonderful to see them. Keep sharing. It doesn't go unnoticed. If you are looking for points, of course, you can register in e-learning. There is just one follow-up document, and you can get, I think it's 20 points. So super easy follow-up. If you've missed some of our previous webinars, you can watch them on YouTube and still get your points. And our next session will be April 19th. The topic is to be announced. Have a wonderful afternoon. Thank you so much for joining us today. We really appreciate it. Happy School Library Month and Library Week, and enjoy.